As Huckabee and Trump both bow out of the big race, which GOP hopefuls will now rise to the occasion? Presidential candidate Tim Pawlenty is here to lay out his platform.
We are practicing child abuse in a literal sense when we deposit those costs on folks.
Frank Luntz reveals new, never-before-seen feedback from his Iowa focus group on possible presidential candidate Governor Mitch Daniels. And the plot thickens in the IMF chief's New York City sex scandal as another alleged victim emerges. And Hollywood's Rob Lowe shares stories that he's only told his closest friends. And where does he stand politically? We are on the road to 2012, and Hannity starts right here, right now. And Donald Trump and Mike Huckabee shook up the GOP field in recent days, but it looks like Republicans may already be in for more surprises. Now, sources close to Minnesota Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann said earlier today that she will make an announcement about her candidacy by the end of this month. And lots of GOP chatter is also buzzing around Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels, whose announcement about his 2012 intentions is also expected in the coming weeks. And within the current field, the Republican contenders are already jockeying for position. Now, former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney raised a whopping $10.25 million yesterday, and that was at a fundraiser in Vegas where he brought together many of his high-profile donors. And former Minnesota Governor, Republican presidential candidate Tim Pawlenty is also attracting his own group of major donors, and he joins me now with his analysis of the GOP field. Governor, welcome back. Thanks for being with us.
Glad to be with you, Sean.
All right, Trump out, Huckabee out. Looks like your fellow Minnesotan, Michelle Bachmann's going to get in. Looks more and more likely Daniels gets in, and maybe Jon Huntsman. What do you make of the new field?
Well, I think the field will settle in, and, I think it'll be a great debate. There's a lot to pick from there, but I think when people look at these candidates, look who's had the executive experience, who's delivered on reducing spending and taxes and government reform in a blue state, and who can market conservative principles across the country and win the election, I think that road leads to my campaign. So we feel really good about that. What
are the issues that you think? How do you differentiate yourself from the Republican candidates? I would argue all the candidates will want to cut taxes. They'll all want more drilling in America. They'll want energy independence, stronger national security. Where do you think you are going to show a difference? Well, how are you different from these other candidates?
Well, that's a great question, and I think a lot of the Republican candidates will sound similar. They're all going to say they're for cutting taxes, reducing spending, reforming schools with accountability and choice, market-based health care, being tough on terrorism, public employee reform, pension and benefit reform, and the like. The real question, Sean, isn't so much wide differences in those issues. There'll be some, but probably not wild differences. The real question is going to be this. Do you have the fortitude to actually do it, or are you just flapping your jaw like another politician? Have you done it? And have you done it in a way that attracts people in and allows us to accomplish it and govern? And in Minnesota, I did it in probably one of the most liberal states in the country as a movement conservative, and the Cato Institute gave me an A grade, one of only 4 governors in the country to get that grade. The other 3 aren't running.
You said that if you want the loudest candidate, it's not me. If you want somebody who's bombastic, it's not going to be me. Maybe subtly were you referring to anybody in particular at that moment?
No, but I wanted to share with you this. Look, the country's facing big and serious trouble. So if somebody wants the entertainer-in-chief or somebody who's going to be the biggest or most bombastic candidate, that's not me, but I don't think that person's going to get put in the Oval Office and given the responsibility to be commander-in-chief and leader of the free world and president of the United States. They're looking for somebody who's got a record of accomplishment, a seasoned, steady hand on the throttle, and somebody who's got the courage and the fortitude to actually do this stuff. I had the first government shutdown in my state in 150 years, set a record for vetoes, unallotted using executive powers, more money out of my budget in my time as governor than all the other governors combined in my state. The next president's going to have to do tough things, and he or she's going to have to demonstrate an executive experience with a record. I did.
One of the toughest positions I think you're now taking is interesting to me. On the 2011 budget, you thought the Republicans probably, when the details came out, should have shut down the government. You're saying now that you would not support raising the debt ceiling. Now, we were told today was supposed to be doomsday. We'll have more on this later in the program. But guess what? We survived the first day after having reached our debt limit. You're saying you wouldn't raise the debt limit. So I want you to explain both those things and how if you were president, you would handle these things.
Sure. Well, President Obama has set up a false choice between America defaulting on its outside obligations, which we simply can't do and shouldn't do, and raising the debt ceiling. But that's not really our choice. Many months ago, I wrote an op-ed, I think the first one published by a national voice, saying there's enough cash flow and money coming in for at least a good while, an extended period of time, to pay all of our outside debts. And then in the meantime, roll up our sleeves and do the real work of entitlement and spending reform that's real, meaningful, and permanent. And they told us, well, the sky was going to fall here in mid-May. Well, guess what? It's mid-May, and now they're saying, well, it's August. And beyond August, they may have even more time. But in that time, before they raise the debt ceiling, and they shouldn't, fix the problem. And the underlying problem is they're spending too much.
Yeah, well, but Ryan is now proposing dollar for dollar. Do you think that's a good proposal, or does that not go far enough? Do you have to deal with the entitlements? Do you have to deal with them now?
Yeah, you can't look at a chart of federal outlays or the numbers and conclude that you can fix this long-term or really without tackling entitlements. It's not easy to do, but it must be done. And if we're not willing to say it specifically, then we're all just wasting our time. And I think for the raising the debt ceiling question, the Republicans should be putting on the table permanent changes like a constitutional amendment to balance the budget, U.S. constitutional amendment, or permanent caps on spending with specific reforms in entitlements. If they don't get something like that, Sean, then we just continue this drift. And America, the hour is late, and this country's in trouble, and we need to act now.
Well, it could take a long time for that constitutional amendment. As you know, the process is arduous. It's difficult. You got to get the states in the end for that to happen. So in the short term, you're saying that if they don't get spending caps built into this bill, you would urge Republicans not to support it.
It would depend what kind of caps. You know, if they're real caps with real targets and specifics around it and they're really enforceable, that would be good. It's not ideal. But we know from the past when they put in these congressionally mandated caps, they can be congressionally removed. I think the real answer is, can you get some significant permanent entitlement and spending reform, and not just some amorphous caps that, you know, may kick in 3 or 4 years from now that are non-specific and kind of aspirational.
There were 204 brand-new Obamacare waivers that were granted in April. 38 of those 204, or 20%, came from, let's see, Nancy Pelosi's district. What does that tell you about, first of all the companies wanting waivers? Some companies granted waivers. A lot of unions have been granted waivers. And then Nancy Pelosi's district is one of the biggest beneficiaries of waivers for health care. What is your reaction to that?
Well, it tells us what we already know, that this is one of the most misguided pieces of legislation in the modern history of the country. It's heavy-handed. It's going to further corrode our economy, as you've already mentioned. I met a person the other day in Arizona who told me he's moving his whole company out of the country. He's got about 300 jobs there, 300 employees, just because of Obamacare. Yeah. He can't afford the mandate. So that story repeats itself.
Why does the word corrupt come to my mind when I hear that there's any waivers for any person anywhere? I mean, you know, I understand why McDonald's wanted a waiver. I understand why some companies want it. But, you know, the idea that some people are going to be subjected to this law, you know, it seems like this may even hit the Equal Protection Clause by the time this is all said and done.
Another example of really crony politics or crony capitalism. If you've got the right connections, the right lobbyists, the right interest group, you get your special deal, and the rest of us get our wallet out. And that's in the tax code, it's in earmarking, and now you see it in Obamacare. And I don't blame people for trying to get out from underneath it. It's an awful law, but when you have that many needs for exemptions, it tells you that the law, it's a warning sign that the law is broken and doesn't work. All right, Governor, good to see you. We'll talk to you often throughout the campaign. Appreciate you being with us. Thank you. And coming up, Frank Luntz is here with his take on which GOP